You just tell me, give me the countdown. Good morning and welcome to the Universalist Church in which love is the Spirit. We are glad you are here, whether you're one of the few in the building today or anywhere in the world. I'm Lisa Smith-Horn, one of the members of the Board of Trustees of our congregation. If you are a visitor, we hope you'll sign our guest book or visit our webpage, www.westhartforduu.org, to learn more. There you can use the contact page to get onto our electronic mailing list. Our electronic communications are the best way for us to stay connected. We look forward to helping you become part of the Universalist Church. We are worshiping online again until this pulse of the pandemic is over. We will return to in-person as soon as things improve sufficiently. After worship, you'll have fellowship through Zoom. You can find the link for that in your weekly notes. If you aren't getting the weekly notes, please sign up for it on our website. And now, I invite you to take a moment to make your mobile phone silent, turn off your email, and put away your keyboards, and settle in for worship.
If you happen to have your home chalice, please light it with me. As we light this chalice, may each of us be aware of its light that extends into the daylight, how it blends, and how it persists. This flame reminds us that we are all bound together to one another, that our lives truly light up the lives of each person whom we encounter, that the love we share with one another, the love that is the spirit of this church, is truly like this flame, burning brightly and wavering not, even in the breezes that surround it. May this chalice lighting remind us this day that our commitment to being the beloved community must persist. Now, if you have a hymnal, please open it to hymn number 121. We will be singing verses 1, 3, and 4. Please join me now in speaking the words of our affirmation, our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Today, our Time for All Ages comes from an 18-minute documentary film that was entitled Martin Luther King Jr. in Connecticut. The parts you're going to see were an effort of a team of Simsbury High School students in the summer of 2010. It captures the young Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his experiences in Connecticut, specifically in Simsbury's tobacco fields. It gives us a glimpse into the persistence of the young Martin Luther King Jr. and his foundational values of equality and freedom for everyone.
Martin Luther King Jr. spent the summers of 1944 and 1947 working on a tobacco farm in Simsbury, Connecticut. It was an experience that would change his life. It was here in Connecticut that a young Martin Luther King would first experience life outside of the segregated South. It was also here in Connecticut that King would decide to follow in the footsteps of his father and become a minister. In the summer of 1944, Martin Luther King was an incoming freshman at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. During that summer, King and 100 other Morehouse students traveled to Connecticut to work in the state's tobacco fields to earn money to pay for college. With the war raging in Europe and the Pacific, it was more important than ever for tobacco companies to find good workers. To house the students, Coleman Brothers Tobacco Company built a large 3-story dormitory in Simsbury, located in the northern part of town on the edge of the tobacco fields. King and his fellow students were accompanied to Connecticut by Morehouse College professors who provided strict supervision. The president of Morehouse, Benjamin Mays, had traveled to the farm to inspect its operation the previous year. Upon arriving in Connecticut, the students were given employment cards and assigned to one of the 3 farms operated by Coleman Brothers. These cards contained the worker's address, the farm they were assigned to, and whether or not they were registered voters. Most of the workers were not. On a typical workday, Martin Luther King rose at 6 a.m., ate a breakfast consisting of grits and sausages, and began work under the tents at about 7 a.m. Reverend King T. Hayes, who came to Connecticut from Georgia to work in the same tobacco fields, also noticed the stark contrast to the South.
And then to be able to have a milkshake at a drugstore, not be denied, it's like unbelievable. You mean tell me you're going to serve me a milkshake in this drugstore in Simsbury? Yes. I never had a milkshake until I came to Simsbury. So many privileges, were just so impressive to me. I felt like I was being in the arena of freedom from oppression.
The workday ended at 5 p.m. King and the other workers emerged from under the tents covered in dirt and the stains from the tobacco plant. Their total pay for the day was $4. The Morehouse students returned to the dorm for a hot meal prepared on one of the 2 large wood-fired stoves. King was assigned the task of ladling out milk and other drinks to his co-workers in the cafeteria. Following dinner, the students engaged in a variety of recreational activities at the camp. There were books and a piano in the dorm. There was also basketball, ping pong, horseshoes, boxing, and baseball. Bill Dushanick remembers playing the Morehouse students.
On Barndore Hills Road, there was a field there which they made a baseball field, and we played them. They were good ball players. We beat them a couple of times, and they beat us a couple of times.
Residents also remember the Morehouse students walking to town, attending movies in the Eno Memorial Hall, and swimming in the Farmington River. Martin Luther King's letters to his mother also mention weekend trips from Simsbury to Hartford.
Yesterday, we went to Hartford. We had a really nice time there. I never thought that a person of my race could eat anywhere, but we ate at one of the finest restaurants in Hartford, and we went to the largest shows there. It's a really big city.
While in Hartford, King attended services in Shiloh Baptist Church and Union Baptist Church, as well as a dance in the Bond Hotel Ballroom. The superb singing voices of the Morehouse Choir also made them featured performers in concerts, most notably the concerts on the steps of the Hartford Times building, which were broadcasted live on the radio. Reflecting back on that first summer in Connecticut, King later wrote,
After that summer in Connecticut, it was a bitter feeling going back to segregation. It was hard to understand why I could ride wherever I pleased on the train from New York to Washington, and then had to change to a Jim Crow car at the nation's capital in order to continue the trip to Atlanta.
We are grateful for all the ways in which you support us and one another. By offering your time, talent, and treasure to this community, you help us serve the members, friends, and wider community of this congregation. As part of that service, we share our general offering each week with organizations that are in harmony with our values. who do work in the world that brings us ever closer to creating the beloved community. This month, we share our offering with Operation Fuel. Operation Fuel was founded in 1977 after a worldwide oil embargo caused an unprecedented escalation in the price of home heating oil. It is the country's oldest fuel fund, whose primary purpose is to provide year-round emergency energy assistance to every city and town in Connecticut, aided by a statewide network of local fuel banks. They advocate for most just fuel policies, help people move out of homelessness, educate clients about energy efficiency, and provide funds to help people pay their utility bills. Each year, they provide more than $2.4 million to nearly 19,000 people across the state. And today, if you woke up and you were homeless, you were pretty darn cold. To give electronically, please use the QR codes on your order of service, the links in the description, or those on our website to make your donation to our offering. Here in the sanctuary, our offering will now be gratefully received. Please join Lisa and I if you have a hymnal. If you don't, Lisa and I will read the connections are made slowly together this morning. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground.
You cannot tell always by looking what is happening.
More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet.
Penetrate quickly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet.
Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree.
Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden.
Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar.
Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses.
Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving.
Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in, a thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us, interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs.
Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen.
Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in.
This is how we are going to live for a long time. Not always.
For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes.
Now please join in singing our Doxology. We have no special requests from congregants this week. However, I would like to take this opportunity to ask that each one of us take a moment to think of someone in our congregation that has made you aware that you are an important member of this beloved community, and say a prayer of gratitude for that person in your community life. O bold enabler, you who speak so clearly through those who are so often silenced or marginalized, may we come to know you through those voices, the actions, the poems, the unrelenting cries of injustice. We ask you to help us learn that life calls us to remain open, to expand our hearts beyond where we believe they can be expanded, to reach into what seems ever-present, uncomfortable darkness and discover our own inner light, the light that you, O Sacred One, calls us to recognize and make our own. As we spend time in silence this day, may we ponder these things in our innermost being, and may you be with us as we do so. May our light persist. And please now join in singing Spirit of Life.
Our first reading is taken from our UUA website. It was added to the website on June 24th, 2021 by Satya Mamdani. Satya writes, "The Article 2 Study Commission's charge makes me think of one word, inheritance. As a UU youth, I know that this commission's work will impact the Unitarian Universalism that my generation inherits. Part of the Commission's charge involves the Eighth Principle Project. As a person of color, I am deeply moved by the conversations about anti-racism and anti-oppression that have resulted from the Eighth Principle movement, as are other members of the Commission. As a young person, I am also excited to see the impact this project may have on the Unitarian Universalism my generation inherits. The values that the Eighth Principle Project holds are important not just to Unitarian Universalism in the present, but the future of our religion as well. All of this is to say that the following statement from the Commission excites me as a person of color and a youth because I see our religion working towards meaningful change that is sure to benefit the generations to come." The Commission's statement. Unitarian Universalism is no stranger to movements that call for racial justice both within and beyond our institutions. Over and over again, pockets of people have worked to say, racism is a problem. Racism is a problem for us, and that we are committed to fighting racism and other oppressions. In 1997, the General Assembly voted to commit to intentionally becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural institution. Yet almost 25 years later, we continue to fall short of our commitments and promises. When the Eighth Principle Project began, it addressed something vital that had been missing in our UU movement, namely that anti-racism and anti-oppression must be central to congregational life and our community building. The mammoth project of fostering conversation within congregations and other communities, and then calling on those communities to make an explicit statement in the form of the Eighth Principle, has become a true groundswell within Unitarian Universalism. The text of the Eighth Principle says, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse and multicultural beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." In this way, thousands of Unitarian Universalists have become part of the real fundamental work of anti-racism and anti-oppression in our communities. And so, Though the task we have been charged with is larger than the specifics of the eighth principle, we understand these ideals to be at the very heart of our work and very much part of the direction we are journeying. We understand the work we are doing to be building on the strengths of the eighth principle movement. Whatever flowers grow from the process of engaging UUs in this reimagining, the seeds sown by the eighth principle project will surely bloom brightly. Our second reading is adapted from an article written by Jonathan Darman in April of 2018 to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s 50th anniversary of his death. Its title was The Persistence of Grace. He was a man, not a god. As a small child, Martin Luther King Jr. was serious and spoke in sentences that startled grown-up ears. But he struggled with spelling and suffered through violin lessons, studied too little, and ate too much. When his father would beat him, he held back his tears. In his teenage years, he became a fastidious dresser, nicknamed Tweety by his friends. As a young man, he fell in love with a white woman he knew he could never marry. Interracial marriage was something that neither his parents nor his future plans would abide. He experienced the exquisite agony of the young, a doomed romance. He was, of course, extraordinary. He read everything he could get his hands on, devouring the ancient classics and the Bible, Shakespeare and Freud. Reinhold Niebuhr challenged his faith. Thoreau opened his eyes. Gandhi shaped his life's work. His gifts were readily apparent. By the time he arrived at Crozar, the integrated Pennsylvania seminary he attended after Morehouse, he had become an electrifying speaker. A generation later, writes Taylor Branch, author of the majestic trilogy America in the King Years, white students who remembered very little else about King would remember the text, theme, and impact of specific King practice sermons. His failings were ordinary and human. He was perpetually late. He struggled endlessly to keep his weight down. He was capable of vanity, jealousy, and deception. To the world, he showed unimaginable, unbreakable courage through years of death threats, arrests, and persecution. In private, he nursed doubts. At the outset of the Montgomery bus boycott, he had been possessed by fear and obsessed by a feeling of inadequacy, he would later recall. But now, the darkness he fought is near again, and we cannot pretend it is the past. Not when cell phone videos show police murdering innocent young black men. Not when far-right extremists with torches march through an American city at night. Here and there in our troubled time, we see glimmers of King's example. In the faces at Ferguson, in the crowds at the Women's March. We see it in the courageous example of the student activists of Parkland, Florida. Like him, they know that acts of violent injustice deserve not just condemnation, but a demand for change. King's life story reminds us that there is an alternative. To free ourselves from injustice, he taught, we must first free ourselves from hate. He urged his followers to love their enemy, to see his humanity, and in time, to change their enemy's heart. Threaten our children, he preached, bomb our churches and our homes, and as difficult as it is, we will still love you. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and to your conscience that we will win you in the process. It will be a double victory.
identity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light.
Thank you, Haley and Ted. We are 16 days into 2022. That's 2 days longer than 2 weeks, just in case you needed to calculate it. Perhaps it is that the New Year's first month is more than half over, or perhaps it's because I've spent these first 16 days reflecting on what I wish to accomplish with this gift of the new year. Or perhaps it's something that I haven't even figured out yet. Whatever it is, I've had an experience of several memories come washing over me over the last 16 days. The first is my memory of sitting in the living room of Clark Olson's home after honoring his life during his memorial service at the Asheville Unitarian Universalist congregation. Clark Olson was my ministerial mentor. He also was one of the 3 UU ministers who answered the call from Reverend Martin Luther King to come to Selma to march for freedom. Clark Olson was at the side of Reverend James Reeb when he died from the fatal attack all these 3 men experienced. Clark wrote in an article in the May-June 2001 UU World these words: "My Selma had been a mixture of anger, fear, sorrow, wonder, and pride. Anger about Jim Reeb's death, about those who attacked the 3 of us, and about the Alabama system of justice, including an all-white, all-male jury that found innocent the 3 men who had been charged with killing Jim. I was on the couch that day between Anna Olson, Clark's wife, and Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, a member of the Little Rock Nine. We were discussing marches, speeches, people involved with the civil rights movement. I asked Minnie Jean a question I have asked many of my sisters of color over the years. How do you keep going? Minnie Jean threw her head back and just said, "We have learned how to persist. You know, we know how to continue, regardless of the circumstances. We've had to learn this lesson and use it often as we continue fighting for our rights as human beings." This was not the first time I have had that word ring in my ears nor touch my heart. Another memory is in my high school days. I remember one of my best friends and fellow basketball players. Her name was Zoe. She came from Gary, Indiana. And she explained how being in this specialized boarding school with us and playing on our team required her to be persistent about practicing and being ready at any moment to be called on, even though it was rare that she got the ball. I also remember being bused to Washington, D.C., and seeing the throngs of people surrounding the reflection pools and persistently working their way closer to the podium in the Lincoln Memorial in order to hear Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice. The echoing of that voice over the PA system and the reverberations in the reflection pool and the young students my age chanting and singing "We Shall Overcome" brought chills to me. I knew what some of those students had lived through, and to be present that day. Then later, another memory comes through. When I entered religious community with the largest group of African American women that the Adrian Dominicans had ever seen, all 4 of them. They too spoke about how difficult it was to persist in a community of women that had no understanding of their experiences, and how in the middle of the race riots in Detroit, these women were frightened for their lives when we held a summer retreat near the heart of downtown Detroit and wanted to take an evening walk through the city, totally unaware of their danger just because they were black. They had to stop the walk and explain to all the rest of the 55 of us that they were black in a neighborhood that was in the middle of a riot. The word persistence has an etymology from the Latin persistere, per meaning through, and sistere meaning to cause to stand. The word itself is defined as stubborn or enduring continuance, as in a chosen purpose or cause. To persist is defined as to refuse to give up, especially when faced with opposition or difficulty, to continue firmly and steadily in the face of circumstances. I bring these memories to you this day to remind not only myself, but each of us that this holiday which we celebrate tomorrow, Martin Luther King Day, took over 32 years to happen. After Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. It was not approved by all 50 states until the year 2000. So I point out that the African American community, once again, as in so many, many times, needed acts of persistence to even celebrate the life of a man who, as our first reading noted, to the world he showed unimaginable, unbreakable courage through years of death threats, arrests, and persecution. I also give you these memories to bring forward the words spoken by Reverend Dr. King himself in his autobiography titled, or edited by Claiborne Carson in a section titled, "How Can I Love a Race of People Who Hated Me?" Dr. King's words are, "Two incidents happened in my late childhood and early adolescence that had a tremendous effect on me and my development. The first was the death of my grandmother. She was very dear to each of us, but especially to me. And my thoughts about immortality grew from her death. The second incident happened when I was about 6 years of age. From the age of 3, I had a white playmate who was about my age. We always felt free to play our childhood games together. He did not live in our community, but he was usually around every day because his father owned the store across the street from our house. At the age of 6, we both entered school. Separate schools, of course. I remember how our friendship began to break as soon as we entered school. This was not my desire, but his. The climax came when he told me one day that his father had demanded that he would play with me no more. I immediately asked my parents about the motive behind such an action. My parents would always tell me that I should not hate the white man, but that it was my duty as a Christian to love him. But the question arose in my mind: how could I love a race of people who hated me and who had been responsible for breaking me up with one of my best childhood friends? For these two shared incidents, the persistence of caring for one another and being present to others surrounding you demonstrate that these were part of Martin's early development, and they certainly built the foundations for his concept of the beloved community. In the middle of that same autobiography, Martin writes, in speaking of 1958, which was a year when he almost died, quote, "This was a rather difficult year for me. I have had to confront the brutality of police officers, an unwarranted arrest, and a near-fatal stab wound by a mentally deranged woman. These things were poured upon me like staggering torrents on a cold, wintry day, just like the waters of justice flowing." Again, Dr. King's steadfastness and his refusing to give up, his persistence to his goals, are reflected in these words: "As far as repeated attacks on me and my family, I must say that here again, God gives me strength to adjust to such acts of violence." Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave all of us examples of living with persistence. Today we heard the words of Satya Mamdani, reflecting on our eighth principle and how it is tied to our inheritance as a religious body. She challenges us to make the eighth principle our own, not for our own individual health, but for the health of our future, working toward meaningful change to benefit generations to come. I would go one step further and note that, as our first reading pointed out, but now the darkness Martin Luther King Jr. fought is near again, and we cannot pretend it is the past. Not when cell phone videos show police murdering innocent black men, not when far-right extremists with torches march through an American city at night. Here and there in our troubled time, we see glimmers of King's example. In the faces at Ferguson, in the crowds at the Women's March, we see it in the courageous example of the student activists of Parkland, Florida. Like him, they know that acts of violent injustice deserve not just condemnation, but a demand for change. King's life story reminds us all there is an alternative. We, as Unitarian Universalists, need to persist. We need to work on the eighth principle becoming part of our everyday lives. We, as a community working toward the beloved community each day, must live these words of Dr. King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. As we share our covenant each time we gather, may we know all the hope and persistence living requires. In the days ahead, may we know that we must persist. We must take one more step to build the land where each one of us knows deep from within that we are divinity defined, that each of us is a star, that indeed we can and must persist in the light. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. Now please join, if you have your hymnal, with hymn number 168, One More Step.
One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung by everyone. We shall sing one more song.
And now let us speak together our unison benediction. Engage with the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And please remain for our postlude. Please now join your fellow congregants in the Zoom room if you have time to do so.